Hi there, I'm Brian, and welcome to the first mini lesson in the lead up to the launch of my new online course, Problem Resolver Pro, which opens for enrollment on January 27th. If you're watching this, you're probably working on a tough issue and something isn't clicking. Maybe the problem is getting worse, or maybe you're putting in long hours but not seeing progress. Maybe the whole initiative feels stuck, or you're just not sure what to do next. And on top of that, maybe you're navigating grant deadlines, endless meetings, or solutions that get more attention than the actual problem. You're not failing, and you're not alone. This is what it feels like to work inside complex issues like housing, education, or public safety, when the tools we've been given just aren't enough. Over the past decade, we've seen waves of systems change efforts, collective impact initiatives, strategic plans, and community-wide campaigns sweep across cities and sectors. Some are highly structured, with logic models, shared metrics, and formal convenings. Others take the form of passionate protests, grassroots coalitions, or neighborhood groups coming together to demand change. The energy and intentions are often real, but too often, these efforts stall. They elevate tactics like stakeholder engagement, measurement, or messaging to the level of strategy while skipping the hard, messy work of understanding how systems actually behave. It's not that these approaches are useless. Many do important work, but when they're treated as the solution, they can crowd out more grounded, adaptive ways of thinking and acting. There is another way. Not a silver bullet, not a trendy framework, but a deeper, clearer way to make sense of complex problems and open the door to progress. In this first mini lesson, I want to lay the groundwork for that better way. I'll walk you through what I've learned after 2 decades in the trenches, across nonprofits, government, and philanthropy. I've worked as a funder, a policy analyst, an executive director, and a community problem solver. I've helped improve outcomes for tens of thousands of low-income people through pilot programs, research, bottom-up systems change, organizing, and lobbying. But that's just my background. The real reason to listen to me isn't because I have a master's degree or impressive job titles. It's because I'm not here to sell you an answer. I don't know how to solve your specific problem. What I do know, from experience and plenty of failure, is this. When we shift from pushing solutions to studying problems, really studying them, with the tools of systems thinking and complexity science, we unlock a different kind of power. We start seeing how the problem functions, where the feedback loops are, where the leverage points lie, and suddenly, we find little levers that have outsized effects. That kind of insight doesn't come from caring more. It comes from being more rigorous about what influences what and how we can influence that. It's a different mindset and method, and one you'll have trouble finding anywhere else. Here's one big insight that changed my work and my effectiveness. Optimization, whether that's a metric, a goal, or bringing a best practice to scale, is what most change initiatives are trying to do, but it usually doesn't work. Now, these aren't just errors. They betray what we mistakenly assume about problems. And in complex systems, these ideas backfire more often than not. Let me explain. Let's start with insight number 1. You can't just optimize one metric. In complex systems, problems don't behave like machines. They're more like ecosystems, dynamic, adaptive, full of feedback loops. If you try to optimize a single metric, like the number of people placed in housing or placed in jobs, without understanding how that metric interacts with other elements in the system, you can easily make the system worse. Let me give you a familiar example. Schools. Say your school district sets a goal to raise 8th grade math scores. Sounds great. I would love that for my own middle schooler. But if all pressure goes towards improving that one metric, what happens? Teachers start teaching to the test. Class time narrows. Other subjects like science, art, and social studies get sidelined. Kids might perform a little better on math exams, but they could end up less curious, less engaged, and less prepared overall. In the big picture, it suffers. Now, the people making the decision to optimize math scores may never see those side effects. They're not in the classroom. They don't have the calm, anxious student who now hates math. They don't watch as music and creativity fade from the school day. The unintended consequences get pushed downstream, and someone else has to deal with them. This is a classic systems problem. The issue isn't that we're trying to improve math scores, or housing placements, or employment rates. The issue is we're trying to optimize one part of a complex system without seeing the whole. Here's the core insight. Optimization works well in systems that are linear. Factories, batteries, airplanes. In those systems, the parts are designed to be predictable and controllable. You improve one part, and it usually improves the whole. But complex problems, like homelessness, education, or climate change, are not linear. They're interdependent, messy. The effects of an action depends on the context, the timing, and the relationships between different parts of the system. You can't just pull one lever and assume everything else will cooperate. So we have to stop thinking like mechanics and start thinking like ecologists. How can we improve math proficiency without sacrificing everything else? Optimization isn't the goal. Understanding and overall improvement is. Now on to insight number 2. You can't just declare a utopian vision and expect people to align. We've all seen the bold goals: end homelessness by 2020, close the achievement gap by 2015, fix the opioid crisis. These aren't bad ideas, and far from it. They represent the kind of future we'd all like to see. But there's a painful pattern we have to acknowledge. Not only have many of these grand initiatives fallen short, the problems themselves have often gotten worse. Homelessness has risen in many major cities, the opioid crisis continues to take lives at a staggering rate, and academic achievement is still trending lower. This isn't about blaming any one group or dismissing the people who have worked hard on these issues. It's about recognizing the limits of visionary goal setting in complex environments. In fact, the more complicated and interconnected the issue, the more likely these bold declarations will backfire. Because unlike a company where a big, hairy, audacious goal can focus aligned teams working toward a common mission, social problems don't have a CEO. They're no one's to own. You have dozens, sometimes hundreds of organizations, leaders, and communities all operating with different constraints, priorities, and timelines. You can't just announce a goal and expect everyone will move in sync. So what happens instead? Skeptics see another moonshot destined to fizzle. Supporters get excited only to grow disillusioned when progress stalls. And over time, these goals, rather than serving as rallying cries, become symbols of wishful thinking, or worse, evidence that nothing ever works. This isn't cynicism. It's a clear-eyed view of how complex systems function. Real change in these environments isn't achieved through grand gestures. It's built through shared understanding, coordinated action, steady adaptation, and long-term commitment. The dream is still alive, but the way we get there has to change. All right, third insight. You can't just copy and paste best practices and scale them. There's a seductive idea out there. Find what works, fund it, and scale it. It sounds efficient, even scientific, and it works beautifully in domains like product development, manufacturing, and engineering. But in the realm of complex social problems, it regularly fails. You can't treat one city like a factory and another like a test site and expect outcomes to replicate. People aren't widgets. Communities are not interchangeable. What works in Tulsa might flop in, Tampa, not because the model is flawed, but because the context is entirely different. Even the most rigorous evaluations, yes, including the gold standard randomized control trial, can't save you from this problem. Why? Because unlike medicines, which tend to work similarly in most people's bodies, or physics experiments that can be replicated in a sterile lab, social interventions happen in the real world, and the real world is messy. You're dealing with different local laws, political climates, and budget constraints, different cultures, histories, economies, organizational relationships. One city might have strong mayoral leadership, another might have entrenched stakeholder silos. One neighborhood might be brimming with informal support networks, another might be burned out by broken promises. So even if an intervention worked somewhere, it doesn't mean it will work again or work the same way anywhere else. That's not a flaw in the intervention. It's a feature of complexity. It's the idea that the parts of a complex system interact in ways that can't be fully predicted or controlled. You can't isolate variables or assume interdependence the way you can in lab experiments. So yes, learn from other places, be inspired by good models, borrow smart ideas, but don't assume success comes from cloning and scaling. Rather, it comes from adapting, learning with local partners, and building trust and capacity within the system you're actually working in. The opportunity here is simple but profound. You can become the kind of person who sees through the noise, who knows how to study a problem carefully, who can map out the structure of what's going on, test real solutions, and build momentum even when others are stuck in hype or despair. That's the kind of method I share with changemakers across the globe. Over the next couple lessons, I'll give you a glimpse of the full problem-solving process I teach and how it's helping people just like you shift from vague hope to real traction. In the next video, I'll walk you through 3 mindset shifts that changed everything for me and that can change how you see your work forever. But before I go, I want to address 2 things that might be on your mind. First, can I really get better at problem solving? Absolutely. Problem solving isn't a fixed talent. It's a skill you can learn and improve. And just like any skill, having the right tools and process can change everything. Because, let's face it, misdiagnosed problems, shallow strategies, wasted energy, those aren't just frustrating, they're expensive. In time, in trust, in missed opportunities. But when you learn to see the structure of a problem more clearly, when you can think a few steps ahead and adapt with confidence, you stop spinning in circles and start making real progress. Second, can I spare the time to study the problem if the issue is really urgent? And I mean, I get it. You're probably overloaded, answering emails late into the night, juggling meetings, trying to keep the work moving. But here's the truth. When you're overwhelmed and everything feels urgent, that's exactly when better problem solving makes the biggest difference. Because if you don't invest the time to understand what's really going on, you risk spending even more time and energy chasing the wrong solutions. This course fits into the work you're already doing as part of your planning, your team strategy, or your professional development. It's not extra, it's foundational. The sooner you learn to work with the problem instead of just reacting to it, the sooner things start to shift. And if you wait, the problem will still be there, but you'll be stuck in the same patterns, only more frustrated and more burned out. So the real question is, what could become possible if you started seeing the problem differently today? The dominant ways of working on social problems aren't working, but there's another way, grounded in systems thinking, complexity, and humble, focused practice. You don't need to wait for someone to fix the system. You can learn to study it, understand it, and make progress within it. On Thursday, in the next mini lesson, I'll show you how to begin.